Gilad, Karni, thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming on the Dancing Paradox podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited. I think you are the first, perhaps, former athlete that I meet that are also interested in such topics and give a platform for that. So let's have a fun conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's what sort of drawn me to your energy field, as it were, because like a lot of these type of conversations, you could label them spirituality or psycho-spirituality or non-duality or things like that. They get very philosophical very quickly, and there's not much practicality and pragmatism and things like that going on. So when I read that you were a former athlete and been in the Israeli forces and things like that, that sort of resonated with me, because I'm at that stage in my life where I still want to go out there and create things and build businesses and things like that. And a lot of other people in this, in the communities, the spiritual communities, they don't tend to have any will for that. I've always felt a little bit incongruent in those circles, and vice versa in the achievement circles, as it were, again. There's always been a bit of incongruency when you start going, hang on, the ethics and things like that aren't quite fitting. So thank you for coming on. Can you just give us a very brief background into who Gilad is?
I enter this answer and question kind of differently every time, and I learn a lot when more and more I am asked about it, and when I'm trying to be in alignment even with what I'm guiding people on, or the message that I'm sharing, or being present is the nature of our experience, and there is always newness to it because it doesn't carry anything from past to the present. So for me, the answer to who we are, who am I, when any of us encounter, is also always new. The moment it's being asked. In the business space, often, especially having businesses that are us as professionals, it often need to come with all of this story that is well crafted and repeatable. So you can say it every time. But the more I encounter the question, and the more I'm staying present with myself, I recognize how it will be new every time it's being asked, because in a way we are new every time. Who am I? I feel like in every moment when it's being asked, I'm being present with the experience that is happening right now, and the nature of my experience is being present. And in a way, when I'm being asked, this is the most true answer I can give about who I am. If we go into background of things that are not here, and stories that are not here that are also important, not dismissing them, a little bit of kind of highlight points in my background that brought me here, perhaps. I grew up in Israel, in Jerusalem, Israel. I now live in the US, while I also work in English and joining the podcast here in English. So obviously, just by this nature, experienced a lot of conflict in the space I grew up in. Spent some time in the military, like all Israeli citizens. Then a decade as a basketball player. And actually, what I remember from our last conversation prior to this podcast, and I asked you a little bit how you got into a non-dual understanding and curiosity about the nature of ourselves, and what brought you here. You said something like, you know what, at some point that person was no longer there. That athlete typecast that was wanting to fight everything and then very ego-driven and then self-driven was no longer there. And that was beautiful. I really remember you sharing that. And I think that's the best description, really. that kind of energy or identity, call it, or type of functioning, at some point was no longer there. The drive remained, even expanded, the ambition and stuff like that, but all the harmful activity around it suddenly dissolved, and all interest to engage in such activities and behaviors that are detrimental was just not there at some point. So actually, I learned from you a nice way to describe my experience as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Did you ever struggle with, or do you struggle now at all with, I don't want to use the word fitting in, because that's obviously, you don't, it's a bit of a rejected term here, but do you ever struggle in either arena, as it were? Like we mentioned before this podcast, there's a paradox going on between the spiritual communities and the high achiever business communities. Do you feel like there's a clash there? Or if not, how do you sort of reconcile them?
Yeah. I feel like often through the lenses of other people, it feels like unmatching or unfitting. Because you either high performer and driven and you know all about performance success, call it whatever you want, or you're spiritual, whatever connotation that has, and you meditate and you do yoga and you read spiritual texts. Again, it's I don't hold any of these kind of ideas. There is a lot of conditioning or perceptions of even what being spiritual means, right? So I feel like through the lenses of other people and our social conditioning, there is a lot of dualistic thinking about these two areas. And to your question, in a way, I love both spaces. And I, in a way, find myself in both of them, but also in a way, often feel like it doesn't embrace the whole of myself, because I feel very connected with both spaces in all of the spiritual understanding and how it calls us to be in the world from a place of a compassion and understanding and non-discrimination in how we view the world and what we call to be other than ourselves. And that, amazingly enough, doesn't compromise any drive, any ambition, any creativity, any will to grow. And I think we have amazing examples of that over history of people that I really see as amazing activists or leaders or teachers. Again, we can call them whatever you want, from people like Gandhi to Thich Nhat Hanh, the most compassionate, understanding, non-violent people that created amazing change. It didn't come with any lack of performance, impact, anything, right? So I love to merge both of them, and I would suggest to encourage people to look at it the same, because both of them can enhance the other space. We can perhaps look at it a little bit like a yin and yang.
So how do you include the non-dual living, or I don't like to use the word philosophy because it isn't that, but how do you sort of embody that and encompass that in your business and your day-to-day existence?
That's a good question. We can call it alignment, maybe, and make sure that from every internal process that we have of our thoughts and behavior and actions, to external processes, business operations, the way we show up as leaders, the people that we work with, the community that we gather, all to be in alignment with how our true nature freely expresses itself through us. So we all share the same nature to our existence, though the expression of it is very uniquely individualistic. So like we look at nature and not all trees look the same and not all animals look the same. How it expresses itself is very uniquely through each person, why it's so beautiful. But to make sure it's in alignment with that. The easiest hint into it is to look at it as the qualities of it are perhaps freedom, unconditional freedom and joy, love to everyone and everything, and make sure that everything we create is a result of me being in that connection to our true nature, and not in the thought that there is I can do something against some external so-called environment and get personal gain. That never works. Obviously, we see it at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what probably Carl Jung would call individuation, becoming the individual against the collective mind, if you like. And I'm very conscious of not tarring that as bad and negative. But as you say there, nature only creates uniqueness. And it does seem that like the recognition of true nature, self-realization, if you like, is that individuation that Jung and other people have spoken about. And it comes across to me as like a complete rejection of worldly affairs. However, you cannot actually leave the worldly affairs, but it may be the be in the world but not of it, and wear the world like a loose cloak, I think the saying is something like that. And I sometimes, so I can only speak here, that I struggle with that sometimes, and it's a bit neurotic, to be honest. It'll keep playing over in the mind that, should I be doing this or shouldn't I be doing this? Am I overstepping the line here? And should I be maybe being more of a hermit? Because I tend to feel in my nature that I'm quite, well, I am introverted. I started this podcast to actually, for self-development purposes, because I'm a very introverted person. I didn't want to put myself out. So then I just started a podcast. I thought, well, sod it, let's just do it, right? So I feel often that I am sort of fighting against that nature, but I question then whether that's cultural conditioning to keep you in compartmentalized way of being, or is it that is my DNA? So that is always going on in my mind, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, you know, and I think even science gets more into it. One of the books I really love is Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. And even there is an example and research about even how DNA shows up very differently in a different psychological, emotional environment. So within our body, the function or the activation of the DNA, and I'm not an expert in any of what I'm saying right now. I just what I learned from his work and just self-study about topics like that. In the same way, again, it's so easy to see it with our environmental situation right now. The function or the health of the environment of living organisms change radically based on the nutrients that are feeding it. It's very simple mathematics here, you know. It's not. It's in a way it's funny that it's like some groundbreaking research and understanding that, oh wow, how I feed my body, not only in food, in thoughts and in perception and in the conditioning that comes with it, actually affect the biology and the behaviors of it. And it should be the most simplistic understanding that each of us should learn when we are 5, 6, 7, 8. We spend so many years in the education system no one has ever told us anything about ourselves. We only been told things about information.
But that's because probably they don't know, or they have no direct experience of that. And in a sense, the blind lead the blind. And then that is, to me at least, the collective is like a continually fed by itself. And you get the odd person that will sort of put the head above the parapet, and culture will shoot that down because it's tall poppy syndrome. And I think conversations like this are very important in the world. And I see it in the numbers, to be fair. They don't get as much traction as, I don't know, how to make $1 million in a week.
Yeah.
Like, people will be watching that because that is the collective psyche. That's where it's at. Whereas if it's more, let's say, deeper, for the lack of a better term, the deeper conversations, generally speaking, don't get that traction because the world simply isn't ready to be listening to it.
There are probably so many layers to why it's happening, right? I think one of the things that evident in our economical structure is that we use a collective or individual addiction or traumas to we don't heal it. We use it to generate revenue. The way so many marketing pipelines work and advertisement is feeding into the addiction that's been developed to consumerism, to seeking, to a dualistic belief, to childhood traumas and generational trauma that all of us have. None of us are not part of it, and we found a way to monetize it. So people that are healers or calling for a different message or a different approach become a very, very small portion, because it's not supporting the current economical structure. We can build an amazing economical structure that based in freedom and unity and understanding of the shared nature of ourselves.
What would that look like to you, Gilad? What would that look like, do you think? You don't have to give me an economic degree, of course, but what do you? How would that look to you? Because do you know Charles Eisenstein?
I'm not sure. No, it doesn't sound familiar.
I think he's a Canadian guy. He wrote a book called Sacred Economics.
Okay.
And essentially it was, how would you say it? Volunteerism, I'd say. Where you just pay what you sort of want to pay. And he gave a compelling case to it. But in practical reality, I'm thinking, can this work? So I guess my question to you is, what would an economic system that benefits people, what would that look like?
It's one of my passion projects. Again, it's not. Okay. I'm not an economist at all, and it's not within my area of formal expertise. Yet it's a passion project that I have to create a different economical structure. What would it look like? I'll brainstorm with you right now. Let's see if we come up with good ideas.
I think the basic, in my opinion, the very basis of it, right? We're digressing here, but the very basis of money should be a real thing. Fiat is not a real thing. It's an idea that we've created, right? So in my opinion, this is why I like Bitcoin and I invest in Bitcoin. That's, again, for a different topic.
Yeah.
But that is actually a set thing, and we know what it is. There's a set amount. There's never going to be any more of it. So we can look at gold and silver that we've used forever until we've got the printing press. We've used gold and silver. Or we go to Bitcoin or something similar. whereby it's a set code, it's never going to change, and man's corruption can never corrupt it. So that's got to be the basis, in my opinion.
Yeah. If we start from the deepest layer, we can, the economical, any structure, any system will change the more and more people come together around understanding of our shared nature. The systems currently are built on the leading paradigm, which is a paradigm of separation and division and separate existences. So the systems are always built around an organizing principle, like religions, like any gathering of human beings. And a guiding principle right now is I'm separate from someone else, and thus we need to build borders between ourselves, and next step, it's okay to do whatever we want to that person on the other side of the border. So even regulations and rules and law will naturally adjust themselves when more and more people come together and say, I also recognize that we share the same nature to our being, and there is no reason to fight for existence, because existence is unconditional and it's not individual to me or to you. It exists freely, and there is no reason we need to fight over it. If I take it on now, like from the individual, I leap to the bigger systems. I see that we spend trillions of dollars a year on systems of war, oppression, defense mechanisms. Trillions of dollars a year, right? In military, polices, incarceration, all of that. That important in the current reality, right? In the current reality, they are part of the system. But when we get to the space, I imagine an economy where these trillions of dollars do not go to systems of division and war and oppression. They go into systems of education, community, resources, building bridges instead of borders. That's so simple. To me, it seems, it looks like a radical idea, but for me, what is a radical idea is the current reality. That we spend so much money as a global community on systems of oppression and defense. So what would it look like if trillions of dollars a year as a global economy are oriented into spaces that are the opposite of oppression and defense and war? And obviously the system right now doesn't work. So it's not even small adjustments, that will be. The system right now doesn't work. It's very evident to all of us. So and the way there that I see, the only way there is collectively more and more of us understanding that we are not separate, that the nature of our being is oneness, is shared, and it's not divided by individual mind bodies. These are some of my ideas.
Yeah, and I completely concur with that. I guess the question that comes to me there is, to what degree are the systems that we've got in place now merely a reflection of the psyche? You talk about corruption and oppression and all those similar things. To what degree is that which resides in us merely reflecting outwards into the world and playing out that way? So would that system exist if enough people were more compassionate and understanding? Would the legs fall off the donkey?
I think the function of them will change. Because if we take, for example, the prison system. So out of the view that there is a broken individual and that is harmful, we need to lock them in a cell. But in that moment, we only removed an immediate threat. We didn't change. We didn't do any change. We only removed the immediate threat, which is important. But the view to it is not sitting on understanding, because what we are addressing is symptoms. The person, there isn't a broken person. There is perception and conditioning and trauma that's operating that individual mind body. There isn't a person there that is really making the choice.
Yeah.
So treating the person would never lead to change. We need to treat the suffering. We need to treat the perception or the trauma that's operating that individual. But that cannot be seen by the people who lead the systems if we don't recognize that this is what operating ourselves as well. That we also being we think we are that individual free will entity that has complete agency of our experience, but we don't realize how much of it is just perception, trauma, and conditioning that's actually creating this movement of what we call my mind and my body.
Yeah. Do you guys do trauma work with your clients? Is that what you do, or do you mainly focus on the awareness aspect of it, or do you again intertwine the two?
The beauty in this space of transformational work and guiding into, again, one's true nature, if we call it like that, there isn't. I'm not a therapist, and I'm not so I don't focus on traumas as my focus of my work. But the beauty of inviting people to that kind of look into themselves and offering them the space and presence to really go into it, which a lot of it is just enabled by the professionals' presence and beingness, is that there is a lot of healing that's happening to traumas from childhood to present. So is it a focus that people come to me for trauma and then we focus on that? No. Is there's a lot of healing that's happening? Yes. Because and this is what's really beautiful about it. It in a way, because the openness of the body and the mind and the person into looking at things and removing. What we're doing a lot is just dissolving wrong perceptions and conditioning and limiting beliefs and wrong views about who we are at our core. So there's just a lot of healing. Again, same if we take it to nature. If we have a soil that we before put harmful nutrients into it, and we even before we put anything positive so-called into it, we are just starting to remove all the harmful conditions. So this soil suddenly becomes very fertile and then grows vegetation and then fruit and creating a very lively ecosystem. If I take it to another passion of mine that I've been exploring for earlier a little bit, it's not part of my profession, but healing and improving the body through nutrition. A lot of just the removal of harmful nutrients that we consume already creates healing, physical healing in the body. Fasting is one of the most powerful healing mechanisms. So it's not about consuming even better things. First, let's remove a lot of the gunk and the accumulation of things that we created, and what's happening in the mind and body and the person's experience is amazing. And is there importance to work with a professional that they do focus on trauma specifically, and can take that also important, depending on obviously the needs of people. Have you gotten much into it yourself in trauma work? Or I know that you are very interested in the whole non-dual understanding and inquire about it, but what kind of, I guess, what you expose yourself in kind of the work that you've done on yourself?
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, it was like about 10 years ago now, something like that. And it was just an immediate, life presented itself in such a way that the current identity had no choice. There was no way out. It had to stop. So it was like, oh, okay, I need a bit of help here. And that was sort of the beginning of the journey. And I just consumed every book I could get my hands on over the next few years. And that led me to ayahuasca, the psychedelic plant medicine. So I've done that a few times. And that was probably my first glimpse into what people might call non-duality or something. And when I started hearing people talk about that, that's what sort of gripped me, because it was like, oh, okay, they're talking what that was. I didn't have a reference for it. But then obviously as you listen to more and more people talk about that topic, or non-topic as it is, it becomes a philosophy, right? And it's just like, I don't need to listen to that anymore. It's just, I get it, I live it, I'm an example of it in my day-to-day life. So I don't need to keep consuming that type of information and everything. But with that, even being able to rest in the beingness and in the awareness of life, I do notice still very, very vividly today, lots of patterns and conditions that are consistently running, and it's whether I work on them probably every single day. A lot of it is through self-inquiry work. I do psychedelics. I work with shamanic substances as well, like certain types of, it's called hape, certain types of nicotine and things like that. And it's very grounding, and a lot of thoughts come up and I start to witness them, where they're coming from, where they're going to, all these different things. So yeah, it's very much self-inquiry and direct experience, rather than reading books and trying to figure it all out from the books. It's just, right, where's that coming from? Why am I angry now? Where's the anger arisen from? Has something happened there? So yeah, it's very, I suppose, personal in a sense. There's no reference point that I can say, go there and check that out, because I haven't got that.
Yeah. What is the answer, or the what do you learn about observing the thoughts, where they come from and where they go to? Is there an answer to it?
What have I learned? I do question the Buddha. I do question the Buddha, where he said,
I love that.
Yeah, he did say something like something like, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's something like, nirvana is the space between two thoughts, or something like that. That's the saying. And I don't actually believe, and that's a strong word, believe that to be true. I think it comes out, thoughts come out of the place that it resides back into. So there's no like thought, nirvana, thought in the Buddha's words. It's nirvana, thought comes out of nirvana, goes back to nirvana all the time. So that's sort of the best I've got, really. I don't think it's something that can be worded. So I'm sorry to disappoint you on that one.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I actually love that you say that you question the Buddha. I never met the guy, but I assume that he would have encouraged it, and I think that's something very important to do in any school of thought, any philosophy, any space. Like it's important to question how we are in the high performance space, and then our coaches and our leaders. It's important to question. You don't question the person, you question the understanding, because without questioning, you cannot come to the felt experience. And teachers are I think the teachers are wonderful in two aspects: what you learn from them that you take for yourself, and what you learn from them that you would do completely different. It's not too welcomed, I think, in the traditional education system, perhaps. But the only real learning here that is beyond just consuming information is a questioning of what we are observing, and then what we are being receiving or encountering with information, a teacher, a parent, our own thoughts, our world. It doesn't, this is what scientists do, the researchers, they just question everything. This is why I am very connected to actually that part. Without there's a lot of alignment, I think, that can happen between the understanding of who we are and science. But the whole questioning is such a phenomenal process, and I think we are being taught very early to maybe be afraid of it.
Yeah,
because certainty and clarity are being worshipped, and answers are being worshipped everywhere. Even if I take it to the business marketing space, all of it is built on clarity. Find your message. What someone like me does, that the message about who you are is new in every moment. So where is the clarity, and where is the messaging? So if all of us.
I think they're called Socrates, something like the first Western Zen monk, because he just questioned everything. Why do we do it like this? And I think the famous quote is something like, "All I know is I know nothing," and you just keep questioning. He got killed for it in the end, I think, but that's what they labeled him, the first Western Zen monk. I completely concur with what you say. You mentioned nutrition, Gilad. Can we just touch on that? The body mind is obviously a very important thing. It carries the nervous system. That is how we sense the moment to moment beingness. I heard you say one time that you were raw vegan as you were a professional athlete. That's got to be quite difficult. I was also the same for a very short period of time. And I really struggled with it, yeah.
I love experimenting. So for me, it was a really fun experiment. I did eat a lot of meat before that, and growing up, I was always very intentional with my nutrition, and based on the knowledge I had, was trying to consume and eat as healthy as I can. Obviously, the knowledge that I had was very limited, and not necessarily proper, like a lot of the information that we have. So I just natural curiosity led me to, okay, how do I make this body? How do I feed it with what it actually needs? And then I never listened to it. I never asked it what it needs. I fed it based on what I've been given to it, or information that I've been given about what it needs, but not from inquiry about what do you need. Like we ask ourselves about where do I want to go next? Why don't we ask our bodies? And that led me into a great rabbit hole of learnings. That I just dive very deep into things. I probably spent thousands of hours in my early 20s reading and experimenting. So it was, I think, like a 3-year period of starting to remove meat and processed food for my diet, then becoming vegetarian, then becoming vegan, then raw vegan. And I think it perhaps was maybe a 2-3 year process. And I think within that, maybe for about a year, maybe or so, I was raw vegan. I loved it. There is part of me that loved the dedication into things. It was a lot of work. I had to, first it takes a lot of time to eat, because instead of eating like some quick sandwich, you eat like 6 mangoes or something. It takes time, And it takes, I used to drive to a farm to get the best quality ingredients and stuff like that. So it was, in a way, I had two jobs, basketball and finding food for myself. So for most of that period, my mind and body and personality, like sense of confidence, sense of self, was the best that it's ever been until that point. People say like you become a Superman. I really felt on that level, my quickness, my sharpness, my athleticism, everything peaked. I was in shock myself. I couldn't imagine that I can perform on this level. It was almost like unbearable to comprehend. I think towards the end, I was getting, and especially with the pressure and breakdown that you have for your body in a professional sports, I perhaps pushed it a little bit too much. It was also a period where I got injured a little bit and eventually got into a period where my body didn't feel good anymore. It's hard for me to hint it was exactly part of the diet, because there was at that time some very big frustration with my career, actually, that put me into a place of like a lot of frustration and anger with it. Also a few injuries that I've been through, so kind of shifted into a period where many things suddenly didn't work for me. And now I'm back. I'm probably 95% vegan. Very rarely would eat something that's not. Just when I feed my body that, it gives me the answer that this is what feels the best nutrition for myself. But truly, that was an amazing experiment, and I felt really the recovery, the lack of need for more sleep or nap or crash down in energy. It was phenomenal. It was really experiencing a whole new reality and an all new experience of having a mind and body.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Yeah.
I mean, you said that you've been into it a little bit. When it didn't work or it was hard?
So I tried to carry on playing football, soccer, wherever you are in the world, for maybe 18 months after I broke my toe, and that took a long time to come back. Obviously, playing football is very important for balance and everything. That was difficult. And then I had like a chronic, the kicking motion, the groin and the hip of the right leg, which was my kicking leg. That was just like chronic uncomfort. So I went vegetarian to try and see if that would help it. There was nothing any of the physiotherapists could do or anything. And then I tried, because that wasn't doing anything. I was taking two ibuprofen. I don't know if you have them over there. They're like strong painkillers, just to get through a training session. And obviously that's no good for your gut. So it just got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. But I had turned vegan maybe 2 or 3 months before I stopped playing. And then maybe did between vegetarian and vegan, maybe 7 years. Yeah, maybe 7 years. And then I was in the gym one day and I thought, I need some meat here. So I went home and ate some chicken. And as I gradually ate more meat to the point now where I'm probably about the opposite to you. So I'm about 95% meat-based and 5%, I wouldn't even say it's 5%, to be honest, probably less than that, plant-based. Obviously, that brings up its own questions to do with the animal welfare and that. And I can't just dismiss that, which a lot of people do. I can't just do that. Yeah. So I do try and get to the local farms, as you did there, to get the best produce and get the best well-kept animals. And it just tastes better, to be honest. It's just better quality food, So I do try and do that as much as possible. And, it's not as expensive. People use excuses just to get out of doing something that they think they should be doing, right? They just make excuses for it.
Yeah.
And we can get here in the West Midlands of the UK, we can get some good quality ground beef for like £4, which is like $5 and a bit. And that will, if you just eat that with a few eggs, that satiates me for more or less all day. So you don't have to be spending lots of money at this time. That's what's working. As you say, that's what works for you. What works for me right now is that. So.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's regardless, we can like non-duality. We can get into a debate of the best diet and what it is. Let's say first, if we remove any processed food, anything that we consume that's processed, we already done a great deal for ourselves. And I think from that point, for me, my intuition and body does sense a connection to the more vegan type of thing, but it's not some ultimate answer, I think. And we need to be very present with our bodies and address it based on our needs. And that's right for everything. It's sleep. There are periods where we need a lot of it, and there are periods when 5 hours a night is enough, and we wake up full of energy. So it's just being very, very in tune with that. As you say about pricing, I think that's also something that we were kind of conditioned to think in a very unhealthy way, that we go to the grocery store. First, we don't really bring much intentionality into our foods or anything we consume, because it's so easy to consume these days. But this is maybe one of the things we have most control on, the food we consume, and has one of the greatest contributions or lack of to our well-being. So just the idea of driving to a farm, getting to know the person, getting the produce, coming back to your house and cooking it, that's, you bring intentionality to that. You bring care to it. It's gonna transfer differently to your body. Same with a relationship with a friend. If you do it with that intentionality, the nature of it changes. How it feels you changes. But you say about pricing and that it's not as expensive as people think. We go to the grocery store and we try to consume nutrients for ourselves, and we look for the cheapest thing and sale and stuff like that, and we end up often buying things that are cheap but unhealthy. And we do all of this comparison, but then when we have a medical treatment, we can spend thousands of dollars without even thinking, without comparing anything, because now it's a medical case, right? So it's again kind of treating the symptom, or in a case of emergency, now we are willing. But what if we treat every meal that we have with that level of abundance? And that will probably save a lot of the much larger expenses that we have on our health. So I think there's a shift in perspective that can be helpful to all of us. To what if we invest more in the food that we eat and less in dealing with the symptoms of the unhealthy consumption that we engage with?
Yeah. What come up there was like attention spans as well, because what you've just mentioned is very short-term thinking. So it's like save some money. But long term, you're going to be spending thousands on a medical bill. Whereas if you just think longer term, you're going to be much, and this goes in business and everything in life. If you look at TikTok, for example, it's like 5 seconds, constantly trying to get people to stay on the app and everything. And that's just being rammed down our throat. And if we can just take a second to come back, just be at peace, just for a couple of seconds, you can get back into the rat race straight after, just come back for a few seconds. When I eat, I tend to, I don't say it out loud, but I tend to say a prayer and just thank the food for nourishing me and being part of what will be part of my body and all this. And I don't do that because I feel like I should do it per se. I do it because life to me is completely sacred. There's nothing that isn't sacred. Even the awful bits of life are divinity playing itself out in certain aspects of us to heal ourselves and to see where we can do better as an individual and as a collective. So by saying prayers to food and to others and everything else, it's like it's more of what life is asking of me rather than what I can give to life. It's like life's asking I need to give it what it's asking for me. I tend to see people, when they set goals in business, it's very often I will achieve X amount by X date and then X, Y, Z. Whereas when I've sort of slowed down in the past and maybe meditated for half an hour or something, what will present itself is, would I be able to do the bidding of a God right here, right now, if he presented himself or herself? And how would that present itself? Can I do that? So it's more than me trying to take from the world in the form of goal setting and money and property, whatever it is. It's now, what can I give and how can I possibly do the bidding of something bigger than myself?
I love that. Well, one of the things I'm kind of highlighting at times for myself, honestly, and also for people I work with, we go like there is a tendency for us to bring more attention or like the medical thing, right? We bring more resources suddenly when in time of need, and then we don't create intentionality and practice in the times of well-being to maintain it or to grow it. So often in a prayer or a challenging time, we would go and ask for something, and now call it from the universe, from the divine, from God, from consciousness, from Mother Earth, give it whatever name you are comfortable with. And we go and ask, like, provide me or give me or serve me, and because I need something right now. Important that we learn to do that, but how often when we are in a better place, or not even in times of hardships, but in both times, hardships and well-being, we go to that thing that we ask for something for us, and ask the thing, how I can serve you, how I can be of service to that. And again, I give it the name that you want. I think so. There is something with the question that you ask. I think that would be a very interesting question for all of us to ask at time. The universe, the planet. How can we serve you, actually, rather than, oh, I don't have something right now. Can you give it to me? And then I pray to get it. Is actually how can I serve that lend our existence, that gives us our existence.
Yeah, and I think if you just get into a habit of listening to what I call them the slender threads. I got that from a guy called Robert Johnson. He was a psychologist. He said, if you can notice the slender threads, life is sort of cushioning you in certain directions. And if you look back over your life, you'll notice where you followed the slender threads and perhaps where you haven't, and you've had to have a hammer rather than just a cushion in order to get yourself back onto that journey or path or whatever. And I think if you just can be quiet and slow down just a little bit, you don't have to stop working or, running the household or anything like that. But it seems that you jump off a cliff and there's a feather, and it's sort of guiding you into wherever it needs to guide you, if you can be present with it rather than trying to fight it and battle with it. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. One of the kind of analogies I like to use for that journey into understanding of self, or the transformation journey, is much like the character in a dream. You say about jumping off a cliff. When we have, all of us at some point, at least everyone I know, had a dream when they are in the dream and they're falling off a cliff, right? And that character in a dream, really, before that happens, really try to fight against it. Right? It really doesn't want to fall off a cliff. Why? Because it thinks it will die, right? what happens when we fall off a cliff in our dream? The next moment we wake up, right?
Yeah.
So same with the ego or our perception of who we are that is not in alignment with our nature. It always think if it goes in that direction, it will die. But it doesn't recognize that what the ego perceives as death is actually waking up. This is what really all spiritual traditions, religions, any kind of understanding into the nature of ourselves hint to. But to the ego, it looks like death in the same way that the character in a dream is afraid of its own death, but it cannot die because it's not a real thing. And when a real thing, something that isn't really real, dies, so there's a waking up to that it was never real. So maybe that can kind of take us into ideas. So I know we were chatting about it a little bit before that this whole concept seemed very with a lot of paradox for many people, and non-duality can seem very dualistic in a way to many people, or some paradox in it. So how do you find it?
Yeah, well, speak to that. Let's reconcile the paradox.
Well, what do you find? I listened to a few of your episodes, and often that comes in, and I've listened to obviously other resources of non-duality conversations. That often there is some kind of pointing into the paradox of understanding it. So where do you find that people call it the paradox, whether there are people who share the message or people who are interested in the message?
I think that the paradox, the fundamental paradox that perhaps people may be living out without recognizing it, is the nothing, everything philosophical issue. Why everything rather than nothing? And the non-dualists would probably say, I can't speak for them all, but they'd probably say, this is nothing just happening. That's something like Tony Parsons or Jim Newman would say, right? And then the mind, because it needs the compartmentalization and the rationalization, will try its best to grab onto that, but there's nothing there to grab onto. And therefore, I think it creates a sense of a paradox. Whether the paradox is real or not is probably where we're going to end up going here. But the sense of that there is a sense of a paradox, in the sense of, if there is nothing, then how can there be everything, and vice versa?
I think anything that the mind looks at, or which is not the mind, I don't see it as an inherent thing to the mind or to us human being. I don't think there isn't an inherent function of that. It's not in the hardware of the mind body. It's a programmed software. So the software through which currently the mind perceives reality, it looks at wholesomeness or simplicity or oneness and says that's dualistic, that's a paradox, and that's but that's only a thought again, right? So it's in a way what we look at and say is a paradox is actually just a very wholesome concept. Like yin and yang isn't a paradox. It just it must come together. It's just very whole. So I don't know if the paradox is in the trying to figuring it out, rather that the exact same thing that it just termed as paradox is just wholesome. And our social conditioning, like high performance and spirituality, seem like a paradox, but they're actually very complementary to one another. So perhaps this is where some of the misunderstanding around it comes, because we name it as a paradox through the way of perceiving that we currently have. Like if you put if there is a bug in your Excel software, it will give an error message every time you do, but the error message isn't inherent, or there is nothing. You can't fix the error message by trying to do anything to it. You need to fix the bug in it, like bug in any software. So the name paradox, or the name that's dual or that's unwholesome, it's an error message that comes up as a result of a bug in the software of perceiving.
Yeah, that's nice. That's very well put. I think that potentially it's language that creates a sense of a paradox, in that we haven't got the words to use in order to express the English language, in order to express what needs to be expressed. If you look at, as an example, Sanskrit has, I think, 96 words for love, whereas we have one. And I think the Greeks had 3 or 4. So it's like, what are we actually referring to? It's a linguistic issue, and we can't get around that, because the language we're speaking is what we're trying to describe. So yeah, I think you've put that beautifully well there. You mentioned high performance and spirituality, and the seeming dualistic nature of those two. I can sit here and say that I sometimes struggle with that today. I still do. I sometimes think, why am I not just sitting in a cave writing, or considering and contemplating the world? Why am I in an office doing business deals and whatnot? How does that show up in your life, or can you speak to how you've sort of brought those two together?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'll answer. I'm curious also what answers do you receive when you ask yourself, why aren't I in a cave just writing and doing that, and you are in an office? Do you have any? Obviously, I don't think you have some final answer to it, but what are some of the insights that come to you from this questioning?
That's a good question. The insights that come to me there are usually they're very unclear. That's first of all, and secondly, I'm a young man, relatively speaking. And seemingly throughout all of human history, young men have gone into the world and created things, or might have had to go to battle years ago, whatever it was, in order to satisfy their soul. It seems to be ingrained in the DNA that, I can't speak for women, of course, but young men need to go out and do things and interact with reality in order to create, in order to become whole in a mental and psychological and spiritual sense. They need to go out and do that. I do a little bit of work with a couple of guys who sort of fell into, I call it heavy spirituality, very young, and they seem to have missed that stage, and they sometimes have to go back into it, set up their own business, have 5 or 10 years really going at the business, and then they feel a sense of, okay, achievement. I can now, it's like growing up. It's not just waking up, you have to grow up. A lot of people don't grow up, they do wake up, but they're still running patterns of childish behavior and things. Whereas in business, you have to grow up, because you're dealing with people in reality that don't resonate with you. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the problems that come up with that? Big numbers and the stress that brings in certain deals and whatever. So in a roundabout way, in a long way of saying, it's to grow up.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. I wrote an article some time ago that I called Business Bodhisattva.
Okay.
It talks about these two parts of ourselves. Maybe we can put it in the
I'll put it in. I'm just getting it up. Yeah,
I think it will be interesting. It's not necessarily talking to the high performance and spirituality exactly, but I share kind of my experience or balancing these two aspects of I can see myself, I could see myself many times as a monk in a mountaintop monastery. Let me sit in silence. I don't really need to interact with people. I'm perfectly in my own silence. I enjoy it. It sounds like a great deal for me. I don't need to be in a nice resort in luxury and stuff like that. Some lentils, rice, and then sitting in a pillow in a nice monastery. I can probably, for myself, be okay with that. Many times in my life, I saw myself also as this kind of like more CEO type, studying something very large, whole business, I was never really attached to luxury or material high wealth, I will call it. Obviously, all of us wants to provide our livelihood, but also could see myself, start this driven part of me really could see myself starting something very large in operations and a business and stuff like that. And for myself, for many years, I saw them as separate, right? It's like, oh, I'm becoming this successful figure, or I'm going to retire as a monk and then disengage. I'm still questioning. And I hope I never stop, really. So it's not, I don't have a final answer. I think, at least for now, I do find a way that both of them are in alignment for me, and these two energies don't fight one another. And also, when I ask myself this question, why don't I retire to outside of society? The answer I'm getting for it would just feel very right to me. It's not. I don't feel like it's a choice there that I'm doing. It's just when I'm questioning about it, what I'm always coming back into is that there's some kind of passion that comes from compassion to bring it to society. And again, I don't see myself as a teacher or a guide or anything that is significant or has anything more important to share than anyone else. But in a way, what keeps me involved in our society as it is something that doesn't want to disengage out of disengagement. That there's something that wants to exactly engage with it within the troubles of our society. Perhaps it would be an example for some people, perhaps not. It's not for me, but there is something that says it needs to happen in this environment, and not to disengage from a place of I'm over it. I am over many things. I am over, shallow interactions and all of these conversations about where my next vacation will be and the next promotion and it's very I don't dismiss it. Just I have very hard time at this point find any interest in it. So I am over a lot of how we conduct our life in the normal way in the modern society. And why I'm still here for now is there's something of integrating it into this messy reality or messy part. I do have a dream or a vision to build a place, a center that would I don't know if even TH would allow people to experience the nature of their being and the unconditional freedom of it and go back to their life from that place and that more and more of us just see the beauty of it. It's we right now look at the world and see so much conflict. My only ask or wish is that we look at this world and then just see the sheer beauty of it and the unconditional nature of it and release all the need to to fight over anything and to hoard anything. It's just I see it can be so simple. I just see that it can be so simple. So as for now, there is something that keeps me here. I don't know if it will remain forever or not. It's an easy question. It's a hard question. Perhaps what I'm perhaps trying to find is a new model as well. I don't know how much longer will last the monastic life or so, right? Life is becoming modern. Many of the great teachers updated the teachings, over time. So even the what I wrote, the business bodhisattva, is trying to create a new way for it to be. You can, and which in my case and people I work with, you can be a business owner and a monk and a bodhisattva through having what we call as a business or occupational profitable thing, that the essence of it is not profit, yet you need to provide for your livelihood. It's definitely an interesting challenge that doesn't have a perfect equation to solve. What requires a process of self-inquiry.
Yeah, and you can be anywhere in the world. It's easy for me to sit here saying this in relative comfort, but in any condition, and you can do self-inquiry whenever, wherever. It's available to everybody. It doesn't matter how much money you've got, or if you're living in a slum in India, well, that's available to you eternally, right? So the retreats.
Funny enough, I think probably more people in the poverty of India, in places in India, not all of India, obviously, perhaps see it and understand it better than all of us with nice apartments and houses in big and nice cities with great positions that we don't recognize it at all. So it's definitely not conditioned by lifestyle.
Yeah, and you can also on that point say, well, look at the conditions that are in India and other third world countries. Like, it's very easy to knock the Western civilization because of the calamities that they cause, and they do. But also, they've also created if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we've sort of hit the first couple of rungs on that ladder by the systems and processes that have got us to where we are. We just need to transcend and include them as we keep going up that ladder. We seem to be stuck at the moment. If we look at India, maybe they haven't hit those two, but they've got the self-transcendence stage at the top. They just haven't been able to satisfy the need for shelter, food, and all these other things. So it's not a paradox, but it's that balancing act, as you said there, whereby maybe that's a good analogy for high performance and spirituality is Western civilization and places like India.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the hierarchy of needs. I can't remember. I recently had a conversation with someone and I said, you know what? I don't think that our basic needs are
Shelter,
food, shelter,
yeah.
stuff. I think our basic needs are freedom, love, presence, because it's our nature. So in a way, we need to twist the pyramid. Self-realization, self-realization is the first need, because anything that's being built and organized, not from that place, is being organized in a harmful way, eventually. So until there is a recognition of our true nature, everything that we create, everything that we engage with, is sitting on some false perspective or bug in the software. So the systems and way of living that we create around it and the way we function individually lead to separation, lead to exhaustion, lead to poor well-being. So perhaps for the basic needs of living in our society to be met, we first need to meet the need of we can call it self-realization of the most essential need all of us ever want underneath the surface is to know the nature of ourselves. And some people, we can call it fulfillment or freedom. The only place all of this ever happen is knowing who we are or the nature of our existence. And then from that place, the rest of the things will happen in alignment and in ways that can grow, not lead us to I think, the dichotomy of or the big gaps in wealth and resources and access to things.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Gilad, we've been going an hour and a half here. It's getting a bit late here. I need to wrap up. Thank you for your time. Would you come back and we'll do a part 2?
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And we've covered ground here that, generally speaking, we don't cover in this topic. So thank you for being open and honest and authentic with what's been said. Enjoy your day. I think it's early there, isn't it? 10 a.m. or something?
Midday for me, 11:30 right now. Yeah, thank you for providing a space to be real and authentic and have a wonderful conversation. I appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to doing another one. That would be fun.
We'll do it. Yeah, cool. We'll talk about that retreat center.
Awesome.
Okay, Gilad, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.